The sun hasn't yet risen over the battlefield, but the samurai is already awake, his hands moving with practiced precision as he fastens the last cords of his armor. Each piece is more than just protection, it's a masterpiece of craftsmanship, layered with secrets and stories waiting to be told. The metal gleams faintly in the pre-dawn light, etched with symbols that whisper of honor, lineage, and even divine protection. This isn't just armor, it's a wearable legend. For centuries, the world has been captivated by the image of the samurai, their discipline, their skill, their unbreakable spirit. But few realize just how much of their identity was woven into the very armor they wore. Every strap, every plate, even the way the helmet sat upon their head carried meaning deeper than the steel itself. Today, we're peeling back those layers to uncover the hidden lore of Japanese samurai armor, the symbols meant to terrify enemies, the spiritual safeguards against arrows and blades, and the astonishing artistry that turned battle gear into a reflection of the soul. Imagine standing on that battlefield beside our samurai, feeling the weight of history pressing in. His armor isn't just a shell, it's a storybook, the fierce dragon engraved on the chest. That's not just decoration, it's a declaration of strength, a silent challenge to any opponent. The intricate lacquerwork layered over years, that's patience and pride made visible. And what about the eerie masks twisted into snarls or frozen in calm? They weren't just to hide fear, they were believed to channel the spirits of ancestors, turning the wearer into something more than human. This is the untold world of samurai armor, where myth and metal collide. So let's step closer past the surface and discover what these ancient warriors really carried into battle, both seen and unseen. The first samurai armor didn't start as the iconic suits we picture today. In the early Heian period, around the 8th century, Japan's warriors wore something far simpler, a far cry from the ornate, layered masterpieces of later centuries. Their earliest armor, known as yoroi, was born from necessity, designed to protect cavalry archers charging across open battlefields. Picture sturdy iron scales laced together with silk or leather cords, flexible enough to allow movement but strong enough to deflect arrows. This was armor built for function, not flair, but even then, hints of something deeper were emerging. The way the cords were tied, the arrangement of the plates, these weren't just random choices. They carried the whispers of identity, the first strokes of a warrior's story written in steel and silk. What's fascinating is how much of this early design wasn't purely Japanese. Samurai armor borrowed heavily from the continent, particularly Chinese Tang Dynasty armor and Korean lamella styles. The overlapping scales, the way the shoulder guards flared out, these were direct nods to innovations from across the sea. But the samurai didn't just copy, they adapted. While Chinese armor often prioritized grandeur for imperial troops, Japanese craftsmen refined their versions for mobility, tailoring them to the rugged terrain and guerrilla tactics of their battles. Over time, these foreign influences melted into something uniquely Japanese, like a recipe passed down and perfected through generations. By the late Heian period, armor had begun its transformation from mere equipment to a badge of honor. Wealthy samurai started commissioning suits with intricate lacing patterns, their colors and weaves serving as silent heralds of family lineage. A deep blue might signify loyalty, while crimson could hint at a warrior's ferocity. Even the shikoro, the neck guard, evolved, its layers increasing not just for protection but as a display of craftsmanship. This was the moment armor stopped being just about survival and started being about legacy. When a samurai rode into battle, he wasn't just wearing metal, he was wearing his ancestors' pride, his clan's reputation, and his own unspoken vows. The battlefield had become a stage, and every suit of armor was a carefully crafted performance. Yet the most profound shift wasn't in the armor's appearance, it was in its soul. Early yoroi often featured sacred motifs hidden beneath layers, tiny engravings of Buddhist deities or Shinto spirits believed to ward off death. Some helmets held kamanu, lion-dog guardians, snarling from the forehead to frighten evil. This wasn't superstition, it was faith forged into metal. A samurai's armor became his temple, his prayers hammered into every rivet. And as warfare grew more ritualized, the armor kept pace, blending the practical with the spiritual until the two were inseparable. To wear it was to carry the weight of history, the hopes of the living, and the whispers of the dead. At the heart of every samurai's armor was the do, the chest plate that shielded his most vital organs. Far from a simple slab of metal, the do was a marvel of engineering, often constructed from overlapping iron or leather plates laced together with meticulous precision. Some featured a distinctive rounded shape designed to deflect arrows and sword strikes, while others were crafted to resemble the musculature of the human torso, a silent boast of the warrior's strength. But the do was more than just protection. It was a canvas, emblazoned with family crests, mythical beasts, or even prayers in delicate script. It told the world who this samurai was before he ever drew his sword. Rising above the do was the kabuto, the helmet that transformed a warrior into something almost supernatural. Its most striking feature, the midate, the crest mounted on the forehead. These ranged from fierce horns to intricate metalwork of dragons or deities, each chosen to intimidate foes or invoke divine favor. Beneath that ornamentation lay layers of innovation. The shukoro, a cascading neck guard made of overlapping metal strips, could deflect blows while allowing the wearer to turn his head freely. And then there's the hachimanza, the small hole at the crown, not a flaw, but a deliberate vent for the warrior's top knot, ensuring his identity and status remained visible even in the chaos of battle. The samurai's arms were guarded by the cote, sleeves woven with chainmail or reinforced with iron plates. Unlike the rigid armor of European knights, the cote allowed fluid movement, crucial for drawing a bow or wielding a sword with precision. Yet even here, symbolism thrived. The left cote was often more heavily armored than the right, a practical choice for warriors who typically held their bow in the left hand while drawing arrows with the right. Over time, this asymmetry became a badge of honor, a subtle signal of a samurai's experience in battle. Below the waist, the heidate and sunniate protected the thighs and shins, often resembling a segmented apron or shin guards. These pieces balanced flexibility with defense, essential for a warrior who might need to suddenly kneel or spring forward. The heidate in particular was a masterclass in adaptability, its rows of small plates shifting like scales with every movement. And let's not forget the kusazori, the hanging panels from the do that shielded the hips, each one rustling faintly as the samurai walked, a whisper of impending combat. Every piece, from the menpo mask's snarling expression to the sewed shoulder guard's sweeping curves, served a dual purpose: to protect the body and project the spirit. Even the lacing odoshi spoke volumes. A suit bound in midnight blue might denote a calm, strategic mind, while fiery red cords screamed defiance. This was armor designed to be seen as much as worn, a declaration etched in every stitch and rivet. To wear it was to step onto the battlefield as both warrior and storyteller, your very armor shouting your legacy before you ever raised your voice. Beneath the fierce dragon crests and the lacquered plates, the true soul of samurai armor lay in its materials, each one chosen not just for strength but for meaning. Iron, folded and reforged countless times, became more than metal. It was a testament to endurance, its layered grain mimicking the resilience of the warrior who wore it. Yet not all iron was equal. The finest suits used tamahagane, a prized steel smelted from iron sand in traditional Tatara furnaces. Its impurities painstakingly burned away to create blades and armor that could withstand the fury of battle without sacrificing flexibility. But iron alone couldn't make a suit of armor. Between each plate, silk or leather cords wove everything together, their colors and patterns as deliberate as the armor's shape. These laces, known as odoshi, weren't just functional, they were a A samurai bound in white odoshi might signal purity of intent, while black cords whispered of unyielding resolve. The craftsmen behind these masterpieces weren't mere armorers. They were artists, philosophers of war. A single suit could take years to complete, each step a ritual. The lacing alone demanded inhuman patience, with artisans threading miles of cord through precise patterns, their fingers moving like spiders weaving fate. And then there was the lacquer, layered over months, sometimes years. Mixed with pulverized stone or charcoal, it hardened into a shell that repelled moisture and even enemy blood. But this wasn't just practicality. The gloss of the lacquer mirrored the warrior's spirit, shining even in the darkest battles. Some suits even incorporated bear or tiger fur, not just for intimidation, but because the hair's natural oils helped repel rain, a marriage of superstition and science. Leather played a surprisingly versatile role, often sandwiched between metal plates or boiled into rigid scales. Neragawa, a type of rawhide hardened through boiling and lacquering, could stop an arrow as effectively as iron at half the weight. And then there were the secrets, the hidden layers. Some armors lined their interiors with silk embroidered with Buddhist sutras, turning the suit into a literal prayer for protection. Others tucked tiny mirrors into the dew, believed to blind evil spirits with reflected light. Every material, every stitch was a dialogue between the mortal and the divine. What's astonishing is how these materials evolved with warfare. As guns entered the battlefield in the 16th century, armorers responded by thickening plates or adding bulletproof tamshi-proof marks, small dents hammered into the metal to demonstrate its resistance to musket fire. Yet even then, beauty wasn't sacrificed for utility. A tamshi mark might be framed by a gilded cherry blossom, a reminder that life, like the flower, was fleeting. This was craftsmanship that refused to choose between survival and artistry. To wear such armor wasn't just to be shielded, it was to carry the dedication of generations, each material whispering its own ancient secret. Dragons coiled across chest plates, phoenixes rising from shoulder guards, cherry blossoms scattered like delicate warnings. Every motif in samurai armor carried a story far deeper than its beauty. Take the dragon, a favorite among warlords. This wasn't just a decoration, it was a declaration. In Japanese lore, dragons ruled water and storms, symbols of uncontrollable power. A samurai who wore this crest wasn't just claiming strength, he was aligning himself with the forces of nature, telling his enemies he could not be tamed. Contrast that with the phoenix, often etched alongside the dragon. Where the dragon roared dominance, the phoenix whispered of rebirth. For a warrior who'd survived defeat, this bird wasn't just myth, it was a promise that even in ashes he would rise again. Then there were the quieter symbols like the cherry blossom sakura scattered subtly across a dew or helmet. At first glance, they might seem decorative, but their meaning cut to the bone. Cherry blossoms bloom brilliantly but fade in days, a poignant reminder of life's fragility. For a samurai, this wasn't morbid, it was motivation. By wearing sakura, he proclaimed his acceptance of mortality, turning what could be fear into fuel. Some suits even paired blossoms with winding rivers, creating a visual poem. Life flows swiftly like petals on water, so fight without regret. Not all symbols were so poetic. The kasha, a fire-breathing demon cat, sometimes glared from masks or sewed. This creature, said to steal corpses from battlefields, wasn't just frightening, it was psychological warfare. Imagine facing an opponent whose armor bore the face of a beast that feasted on the dead. Even the lotus, sacred in Buddhism, had its place. A warrior might wear it not just for piety, but as a statement. Like the lotus rising from mud, he could emerge untainted by the brutality of war. Colors, too, were a language. Gold leaf applied to a dragon's scales didn't just catch the light. It signaled divine favor, as if the gods themselves had gilded the warrior. Deep indigo, derived from rare AI dye, wasn't merely rich, it symbolized depth of strategy, a mind as unfathomable as the ocean. even the absence of color spoke volumes. A plain black menpo mask devoid of ornament might belong to a veteran who needed no adornment to terrify. His silence was the message. What's fascinating is how these symbols evolved with time. Early armor drew heavily from Chinese mythology, but by the Edo period, motifs became distinctly Japanese, like the Tosai Gusoku armor's use of peonies, which in Japan symbolized bravery rather than the Chinese association with wealth. And some designs were intensely personal. A general who survived a near-fatal wound might commission armor with a yamabuki flower, a nod to the golden carrier that blooms stubbornly in harsh mountains. His armor didn't just protect his body, it told his story, stitch by symbolic stitch. This was the genius of samurai armor. It turned fear into art, mortality into meditation. Every crest, every hue, every carefully chosen image was a battle cry, not just against enemies, but against oblivion itself. To wear such symbols wasn't vanity, it was defiance. A warrior clad in phoenixes and blossoms didn't merely fight. He declared with every step that his life and his death would mean something. On the chaotic battlefield where dust and blood obscured faces, a samurai's armor didn't just protect him, it announced him. The mon or family crest emblazoned on his do, helmet or sewed shoulder guards was more than decoration. It was a heraldic shout in the din of war. These symbols, often simple yet striking, a circle of interwoven vines, a stylized butterfly, a trio of oak leaves, carried the weight of centuries. To display your mon was to stake your life on your lineage, declaring not just who you were but who you stood with. A single crest could unite scattered warriors under a common banner, turning individual fighters into an unbreakable wave. The artistry of these crests was deceptive in its simplicity. Take the Tokugawa clan's Aoi mon, 3 hollyhock leaves inside a circle. To the untrained eye, it might seem modest, but to a rival, it was a warning. This warrior served the shogun himself. Some mon were geometric, like the Hosokawa clan's 9-planet crest, a cosmic claim to destiny. Others drew from nature, like the Shimazu's cross-shaped wary bishi, mimicking water chestnuts but evoking unyielding resilience. Each design was distilled to its essence, recognizable even in the fray of battle, where a glimpse of a crest could mean the difference between an ally's arrow and an enemy's sword. But mon weren't just about identity, they were about allegiance. A samurai might wear his lord's crest alongside his own, a visual oath of loyalty. In the Sengoku period's shifting alliances, this doubled as survival strategy. A warrior bearing the Yusugi mon might switch to the Take-ta crest overnight, his armor literally rewritten to reflect new loyalties. Some even layered crests ingeniously. The Date clan's armor sometimes featured their crescent moon mon superimposed on a larger sun motif, a nod to their claimed descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, a divine resume etched in steel. The placement of these crests was its own language. A mon on the chest shouted dominance, while one tucked into the shikoro neck guard whispered subtlety. Helmets often bore crests on the medate forehead ornament, turning the warrior into a walking standard. But the boldest statement, the horo, a billowing cloak adorned with giant mon worn by elite messengers. Imagine that sight, a rider galloping through smoke, his cloak swelling like a sail, his crest visible for miles, a human banner announcing victory or doom. What's often overlooked is how these crests transcended battle. They appeared on armor's hidden surfaces too, inside the do or beneath the sewed, like secret signatures. Some clans used inverted or fragmented versions of their mon in these hidden spaces, a coded nod to ancient family sayings or wartime regrets. The Mori clan, for instance, sometimes tucked a crest with broken rings into their armor's lining, a somber reminder of a shattered alliance. This was heraldry with layers, as much about inner truth as outward show. By the Edo period, mon became even more elaborate, with some armors featuring entire scenes, a flock of cranes soaring across a dew or a moonlit landscape on a haydate. Yet the classic crests never lost their power. To wear one was to carry your ancestors into battle, their triumphs and failures woven into your armor's very skin. In a world where honor was everything, the mon was more than a symbol. It was a compass, a vow, and sometimes a reckoning. To step into samurai armor was to step into a sacred embrace not just of steel but of spirits. Warriors didn't merely wear their armor, they entrusted their lives to it, believing every plate and cord hummed with unseen power. Take the yoroi haramaki, a type of cuirass left partially open at the back. Superstitiously, this gap wasn't a flaw, it was a door. Legends whispered that sealing the body completely would trap the warrior's soul inside the armor if he fell, so the opening allowed his spirit to escape honorably into the afterlife. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was covenant. Buddhism and Shintoism bled into the very rivets of samurai armor. Helmets often concealed tiny gamogi, prayer strips inscribed with sutras tucked behind the medate crest. These weren't mere rituals, they were armor for the soul. Some kabuto even bore Fudo Myo-o, the wrathful Buddhist deity, his snarling visage hammered into the forehead plate to paralyze evil with a single glance. And then there were the masks menpo, carved into grotesque snarls or eerie calm. Far from theatrical, these expressions were calculated. A demon-faced menpo didn't just frighten enemies, it channeled tengu, fierce mountain spirits believed to grant supernatural combat prowess. To wear it was to become more than human. The armor's lacing patterns held secrets too. Certain odoshi weaves mirrored sacred Shinto straw ropes Shimenawa used to ward off impurities. A diagonal cross lacing known as kiku mimicked the shell of a tortoise, an animal synonymous with longevity in Japanese myth. Even colors carried divine weight. White odoshi, rare and striking, wasn't chosen for vanity. It mirrored the purity of Shinto priestly vestments, wrapping the warrior in a cloak of sanctity. Some clans took this further, embedding relics into their armor. A scrap of parchment from a temple scripture, a sliver of wood from a sacred tree. These weren't ornaments but talismans. The Uehara clan famously lined their do with silk embroidered by Buddhist nuns, each stitch a whispered prayer. And in battle's heat, when arrows rained like hellfire, warriors clung to these hidden safeguards as fiercely as their swords. Yet the most profound spiritual layer wasn't in the armor's making but in its breaking. A suit shattered in battle wasn't discarded, it was retired with reverence, often donated to temples as an offering. These broken plates became yoroi zashi, armor shrines where monks prayed for the warrior's spirit. In death, the armor completed its final duty, not as a shell of war but as a bridge to the divine. To the samurai, this was the ultimate truth that steel alone couldn't protect you, only the unseen could. A samurai's armor wasn't just worn, it was lived. Every strap tied, every plate polished was a ritual steeped in Bushido, the warrior's code that bound duty and discipline into every breath. Picture this before dawn, a warrior kneels in silence, running his hands over the odoshi cords of his do, checking each knot with the same reverence as a monk tending temple bells. This wasn't maintenance, it was meditation. The act of caring for armor mirrored the core tenets of Bushido seri, order, in the meticulous arrangement of plates, chu, loyalty, in preserving the crest of his lord, meiyo, honor, in ensuring no frayed cord would betray him in battle. To neglect even a speck of rust was to disrespect the very soul of the warrior's path. The armor's design was a physical manifesto of Bushido's ideals. Take the coat arm guards, left side reinforced for archery. This asymmetry wasn't just practical, it embodied jin, benevolence, as the stronger guard protected the arm that held the bow, the weapon of distance and strategy, over the sword's brutality. Even the menpo mask's frozen snarl spoke to gi, righteous courage, transforming fear into a weapon. And when a samurai fastened his heidate, the thigh guards, he wasn't just securing plates, he was enacting rei, respect for his opponents, his ancestors, and the battle itself. Every piece was a lesson in balance. The kabuto's weight taught humility, while the sunniate shin guards, flexible yet unyielding, mirrored the resolve to adapt without breaking. Preparedness was carved into the armor's soul. A samurai's yoroi was never stored haphazardly. It rested on a stand called a gusokudena, arranged for instant readiness. This wasn't superstition, it was seishin, the spirit of alertness. The kusazori panels around the hips were kept slightly loose, not for comfort, but so their faint rustle would train the warrior to move with awareness, every step a whisper of zanshin, lingering focus. Even the lacquer's gloss had purpose. Its sheen made blood slide off easily, a grim reminder that victory required not just strength but teine, fastidiousness in the grimmest moments. But perhaps the deepest link between armor and Bushido lay in its imperfection. The art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, had its martial counterpart. A dented do wasn't discarded, it was mended with pride, the scars proving Fudoshin immovable spirit. Some suits even featured tameshi marks, deliberate dents from musket tests worn like badges of resilience. In this way, the armor taught what words could not. That true honor wasn't in being unbreakable, but in rising again and again from the break. When a samurai donned his armor, he wasn't just dressing for war. He was wrapping himself in the very essence of Bushido, the discipline in every laced cord, the honor in every crest, the readiness in every polished plate. To wear it was to carry not just steel but an oath, and in the silence before battle, as the cord settled against his body, the armor whispered back, "Remember who you are." Among the countless suits of samurai armor that have survived the centuries, none commands as much awe as the jet-black yoroi of Date Masamune, the legendary one-eyed dragon of Oshu. His armor wasn't just battle gear, it was a psychological weapon. The matte black lacquer, devoid of any reflection, seemed to absorb light, making him a shadow on the battlefield. The kabuto helmet bore a towering crescent moon crest, a symbol so bold it became his trademark. But the true genius lay in the details, the mask's missing right eye, mirroring Masamune's own lost eye to smallpox, turned vulnerability into menace. Stories claim enemies would freeze mid-charge, mistaking him for a vengeful Tengu spirit. Even the armor's name, Yamabushi Yoroi, hinted at its mystical aura, referencing the mountain ascetics who communed with demons. Then there's Takedo Shinjin's fiery red Tosai Gusoku, a suit as flamboyant as the warlord himself. The crimson odoshi lacing wasn't just for show. It mirrored Shinjin's banner, which bore the sun to, quote, "swift as the wind, silent as a forest, fierce as fire, immovable as a mountain." His helmet, crowned with a gilded Ajimaki bow, was said to dazzle foes like sunlight glancing off armor. But the most tantalizing legend, that Shinjin's armor was enchanted by a Yamabushi monk, its plates impervious to bullets. Skeptics point to the thickened tameshi marks, proving it was tested against muskets, but the myth endures. That red armor didn't just protect Shinjin, it made him untouchable. Few suits blur the line between history and myth like Yusugi Kenshin's Rokumonsen Yoroi. Adorned with 6 copper coins, Rokumonsen the armor symbolized Kenshin's devotion to Bishamonten, the Buddhist god of war. Legend claims he entered battle unarmored, trusting the deity to turn blades aside, until a near-fatal arrow convinced him otherwise. The coins, each engraved with Bishamonten's mantra, were his compromise, divine protection worn as armor. Even his helmet defied convention, its flowing shukoro resembling a priest stole more than a warrior's guard. To face Kenshin was to face a monk who'd traded prayer beads for a spear. Honda Tadakatsu's antlered kabuto is another icon. Unlike Masamune's intimidation or Shinjin's flair, Tadakatsu's armor screamed raw defiance. The massive deer antlers mounted on his helmet weren't just ornamental, they were a challenge. In a time when most Mide crests were metal, Tadakatsu's choice of actual antlers, some say from a sacred Nara deer, whispered of primal power. His do, studded with rivets in the shape of the Buddhist manji symbol, fused brute strength with spirituality. Contemporary accounts describe him riding through gunfire untouched, his antlers slicing through smoke like a specter's crown. Small wonder Tokugawa Ieyasu called him the warrior who surpasses death itself. But perhaps no armor carries tragedy like Sanada Yukimura's Hoshi Kabuto, its spiked helmet stars embedded to mirror the fate he was born under. The Sanada crest, 6 coins decorated the do, but the true story lay in the lining. Concealed pockets held soil from his homeland, a reminder of what he fought for. His final stand at Osaka Castle birthed myths that his armor, soaked in blood, glowed crimson at dusk. To this day, some claim finding a speck of that dirt ensures victory, a bittersweet legacy for the man called the last true samurai. These armors weren't just relics, they were extensions of the men who wore them. Every scratched plate, every frayed cord holds whispers of battles where history and legend collided. To study them isn't just to examine craftsmanship, it's to confront the very soul of the samurai. Hollywood loves to show samurai clanking across battlefields like medieval tanks, their armor so heavy they can barely lift their swords. But history tells a different story, one where speed and precision triumphed over brute bulk. A fully outfitted samurai's armor weighed between 20 to 40 pounds, lighter than a modern soldier's full combat gear. Compare that to a European knight's 60-pound plate mail, and suddenly the samurai's legendary agility makes sense. Those layered plates and laced cords weren't just for show, they were engineered for fluid movement. The secret, flexibility built into every joint. The kusazuri thigh guards swayed with each step like a dancer's skirt, while the coat arm sleeves allowed archers to draw bows with pinpoint accuracy. This wasn't armor that weighed you down, it was armor that moved with you. One of the most persistent myths is that samurai needed help to suit up like knights reliant on squires. In truth, a seasoned warrior could don his yoroi alone in minutes. The Odoshi lacing system was genius in its simplicity. Cords tied in specific patterns allowed plates to shift dynamically, distributing weight evenly across the body. Historical scrolls depict samurai sprinting, mounting horses, even performing acrobatic leaps in full armor. The Hojo Godeki, a 14th century chronicle, describes a warrior named Sasaki Taketsuna flipping onto an enemy's horse mid-charge, hardly the move of someone burdened by immobility. Then there's the myth of samurai armor being delicate. Sure, the lacquer and silk cords looked ornate, but they were battle-tested. The layered construction iron or leather scales sandwiched between lacquered rawhide could deflect arrows and absorb sword strikes. Some do even had a ribbed texture, not for decoration but to redirect blade edges away from vital organs. And contrary to romanticized tales, samurai didn't avoid firearms because of tradition, they adapted. By the late 16th century, armorers thickened chest plates at key angles to ricochet musket balls, leaving visible tameshii dents as proof of their resilience. Perhaps the biggest misconception is that samurai armor was uniform. In reality, it evolved with brutal pragmatism. During the Sengoku period's endless wars, some warriors swapped ornate kabuto for simple jingasa iron hats, prioritizing function over flair. Others stripped down to Hara 8 minimalist belly guards when speed meant survival. Even the iconic Menpo masks had practical roots. Their copper lining absorbed sweat, while the flared nostrils improved airflow during exertion. Every mythic detail served a gritty purpose, so next time you picture a samurai in armor, forget the Hollywood trope of the sluggish knight. Imagine instead a warrior who could pivot on one foot to dodge an arrow, whose armor rustled like leaves in wind as he charged, whose every plate was a calculated balance of protection and freedom. That's the real legacy, not a cage of steel, but a second skin forged for war's chaotic dance. Samurai armor wasn't just a shield for the battlefield. It was a bridge between the living and the divine, a sacred vessel for life's most pivotal moments. When a young warrior came of age, his first suit of armor wasn't merely gifted, it was consecrated. In a ceremony called Genpuku, the armor became his second skin. its laces tied by elders as they whispered prayers for courage and wisdom. This wasn't just a practical rite, it was a transformation. The moment the helmet settled onto his head, the boy ceased to exist, only the samurai remained. The armor's weight wasn't just physical, it carried the gravity of lineage, the unspoken vow to uphold a name centuries in the making. Some clans even buried the boy's childhood toys beneath the ceremony hall's floorboards, a symbolic grave for innocence as the armor sealed his new destiny. In death, the armor's role grew even more profound. A fallen samurai wasn't laid to rest in simple shrouds, his yoroi was arranged around him as if he might rise to fight again. The kabuto helmet rested beside his head, its shukoro neck guard splayed like wings, ready to shield him in the afterlife. Families would sometimes place the armor upright in the home for days, offering it meals as if the warrior's spirit still lingered within the steel. This practice, called yoroi mochai, blurred the line between mourning and reverence. The armor wasn't just a relic, it was a shrine, a tangible thread connecting this world to the next. Rituals extended beyond individual lives. Before major battles, entire armies would gather for yoroi shiki, a mass blessing of armor. Priests draped sacred shimnoa ropes over suits, tapping each plate with purifying gohei wands to awaken the kami, the spirits believed to dwell within the metal. Some warlords took this further, sealing slivers of temple wood or sutras inside their do before charging into war. The armor became a moving altar, its wearer both warrior and priest. Even in victory, the rituals didn't end. Captured armor was often offered to shrines like Tsurugaoka Hachimangu, stacked in towering displays to honor the gods of war. These weren't trophies, they were sacrifices, steel and silk given back to the divine. The most haunting ceremony was reserved for armor too damaged to repair. Instead of discarding it, clans would conduct yoroi kuyo, a funeral for the suit itself. Plates were carefully disassembled, cords untied with the same precision as when they were woven, and each piece laid to rest in a ceremonial pyre. As the smoke curled upward, mourners chanted for the armor's tamashiai, its soul, to find peace. To the samurai, this made perfect sense. If armor could protect a life, it deserved honor in death. From cradle to grave, armor was never just metal. It was a witness. It carried the sweat of first battles, the tears of final breaths, and the silent prayers of generations. To wear it was to step into a river of tradition where every strap tied the living to the dead, and every plate gleamed with the light of something eternal. The image of the samurai is often cast in male shadows, but history whispers of women who stood just as tall in the ranks, women like Tomo Gozen, whose name alone made enemies hesitate. While most samurai armor was designed for male warriors, the annals of war reveal striking exceptions. Suits tailored for female shoulders, narrower at the waist, with lighter plates that prioritized agility over brute force. Tomo's armor, as described in the Hike Monogatari, was no mere imitation of men's gear. Her do curved to fit her form, its lacquer gleaming with the same phoenix motifs worn by male commanders, but the odoshi lacing bore a rare plum blossom pattern, a quiet nod to her identity. In battle, she fought not as a novelty, but as a legend, her naginata slicing through cavalry charges with lethal grace. Beyond Tomo, other women left their mark on the battlefield. The honor bujeisha, female warriors of the samurai class, often wore simplified versions of traditional armor. Damaru or Hara 8, that balanced protection with the flexibility needed for their preferred weapons, the naginata's sweeping arcs or the kaiken dagger's close strikes. Some suits, like those of the Aizu clan's women, featured kabuto with silver crescent moons instead of fearsome midate, a subtle blend of elegance and lethality. These women weren't anomalies, they were strategic. During sieges, when castles fell and male warriors perished, it was often the honor bujeisha who led last stands, their armor becoming symbols of unbroken resistance. The customization of their gear tells a deeper story. A female samurai's coat might be lined with silk embroidered by her hand, stitching prayers between the threads. Helmets sometimes hid hairpins in their linings, not for vanity, but as final weapons if disarmed. Even the colors spoke volumes. While men favored bold reds or blacks, women like Hojo Masako wore deep indigo odoshi, a hue associated with wisdom and calm amid chaos. Their armor wasn't just functional, it was a testament to their dual role as warriors and guardians. When Masako rallied troops after her husband's death, her armor didn't mimic his, it proclaimed her own authority, its design whispering of both battlefield prowess and the unyielding duty of a widow protecting her clan's future. Yet perhaps the most poignant relics are the children's armors, tiny yoroi crafted for daughters of samurai families. These weren't toys, they were training tools, their scaled-down plates teaching girls as young as 7 the weight of their heritage. Some, like the young Nakano Takiko, would later wear full suits into battle, their childhood rehearsals becoming adult realities. The existence of these small armors shatters the myth that women were sidelined in war. They were prepared from the beginning to step into the fray. The legacy of these women lingers in the overlooked details: a menpo mask with softer cheek contours, a heidate thigh guard adjusted for a rider's narrower stance. Their stories remind us that samurai armor wasn't just a uniform, it was a canvas, and on it women painted their own indelible strokes of courage. A samurai's armor wasn't complete without its silent partner, the horse clad in its own shimmering steel skin. While warriors dominate the spotlight, their mounts wore masterpieces of their own, yoroi or horse barding, a breathtaking fusion of protection and art. Picture a stallion draped in lacquered plates, its flanks sheathed in iron scales that caught the sun like a dragon's hide. This wasn't just decoration, it was the difference between a cavalry charge that shattered enemy lines and one that collapsed under a hail of arrows. The most elaborate barding covered every vital point, the Bayman faceplate etched with horns or demonic visages to terrify foes, the Awa-ita chest armor layered like the samurai's own do, even the kusazuri flank guards that swayed with the horse's gallop. Together, they turned a living, breathing animal into a mythic beast of war. The designs were as varied as the warriors who rode them. Some clans favored stark simplicity, black lacquered plates laced with undyed hemp projecting grim efficiency. Others, like the Taikta, adorned their steeds in crimson barding to mirror their famed Red Demon cavalry, a tidal wave of color and noise bearing down on the enemy. The Date clan took spectacle further, outfitting horses with silvered Bayman masks shaped like grinning tengu, their long noses bristling with actual blade tips. But beneath the artistry lay ruthless practicality. The shukoro neck guards weren't just for show. Their overlapping plates deflected downward sword strikes aimed at the horse's jugular. Even the reins were armored kawagusoku, leather straps threaded with chainmail to prevent them from being severed mid-charge. Yet the true genius of yoroi was in its adaptability. Unlike the rigid barding of European knights, Japanese horse armor moved with the animal. The plates were often suspended on silk cords, allowing the horse to breathe and pivot without restraint. During the Sengoku period's chaotic battles, this meant cavalry could switch from frontal assaults to feigned retreats without sacrificing protection. Some barding even incorporated padded cloth beneath the plates, soaked in vinegar and salt to repel fire arrows, a detail born from bitter experience. Spiritual symbolism ran as deep in horse armor as it did in a samurai's own yoroi. The Bayman masks frequently bore the clan's mon, but also hidden prayers, tiny daruma dolls or sutras tucked behind the forehead plate to safeguard the horse's spirit. There are accounts of priests blessing war horses before battle, draping their barding in Shimenawa ropes to ward off evil. In a culture that revered horses as messengers of the gods, their armor wasn't just metal, it was a covenant between the earthly and divine. The loss of a horse in battle was more than tactical, it was spiritual. chronicles describe samurai burning their mounts barding on funeral pyres, the lacquer curling into smoke like a soul released. To see a rider return with empty, bloodied stirrups was to witness a man halved. The horse's armor, now a hollow shell, would sometimes be hung in temples alongside human yoroi, its silent plates a testament to the bond that once thundered across battlefields. So the next time you envision a samurai, don't stop at the warrior. See the creature beneath him, armored not as an afterthought but as an equal. For in the dance of war they moved as one, the steel-clad man and the mythic beast, their fates laced together in silk and iron. In the quiet halls of Japan's oldest temples and castles, some suits of armor stand a little too still, as if waiting. Legends speak of yoroi that rustle in the dead of night, their cords creaking with the weight of invisible occupants. One of the most infamous is the cursed armor of Kuroda, a jet-black Tos Aigusoku said to belong to Kuroda Yoshitaka, a warlord who met a gruesome end. After his death, his armor was enshrined, but visitors claimed the Menpo mask's hollow eyes would follow them, its teeth gritting as if in silent agony. Priests reported hearing the clink of plates moving in empty corridors, and some swore the kabuto's crest, a twisted iron serpent, would shift position when no one was looking. The armor wasn't just haunted, it was angry. Then there's the ghost armor of Usugi Kenshin, a snow-white yoroi said to appear on moonlit battlefields long after its wearer's death. Kenshin, the dragon of Echigo, was rumored to have been assassinated by a ninja hiding in his latrine. His armor, now displayed at Kasugiyama Castle, is said to weep literally. Guards have found the dew damp with moisture, though no leak can be found. On the anniversary of Kenshin's death, witnesses claim the suit's Shikoro neck guard rises and falls like a breathing thing. Skeptics dismiss it as condensation, but believers whisper that Kenshin's spirit still practices Iaido, his ghostly blades cutting the air in eternal vigilance. But perhaps no tale chills the spine like the wandering armor of Ekigahara. Deep in the suicide forest, a rusted gusoku was discovered propped against a tree, its kabuto filled with human teeth. Locals say it belonged to a ronin who committed seppuku there in disgrace. Hikers report glimpsing the armor moving between the trees, its tattered odoshi cords trailing like cobwebs. Some who have touched it vanish without a trace, their own belongings found neatly stacked beside the suit, as if someone or something had dressed in their place. Even museums aren't immune. The Tokyo National Museum once displayed a Sengoku-era yoroi that would inexplicably topple over despite being secured. Curators noticed the incidents always occurred at the hour its owner died in battle. When a researcher joked about testing its curse, the suit's coat arm guard allegedly tightened around his wrist, leaving bruises in the shape of lacing. It was promptly returned to its shrine, where priests now offer its sake a peace offering to the restless dead. These stories aren't just campfire tales. They reveal a deeper truth. To the samurai, armor was a vessel for the soul. If a warrior died betrayed, unavenged, or in unbearable shame, his spirit might cling to the steel that once shielded him. The creak of old plates in the wind, that's not just wood settling, it's the sound of a ghost still strapping in for battle. Beneath the ornate surfaces of samurai armor lay secrets sharper than any sword. Some suits hid more than just the warrior's body. They concealed last resorts, silent prayers, and tools of deception. Take the Menpo mask's hollow interior. While its snarling exterior terrified foes, the inside often held a razor-thin kakashi buki, a hidden blade tucked near the chin. In close combat, a headbutt could drive this spike into an enemy's throat, a brutal surprise when swords were locked. Other masks concealed poisoned needles in the nasal cavity, triggered by a sharp exhale. These weren't tricks of dishonor, they were acts of desperation, the final whispers of a cornered warrior refusing to fall. The coat arm guards doubled as arsenals. What looked like decorative stitching along the forearms sometimes hid shikame's way, slender daggers woven into the lacing. A quick tug could free the blade mid-motion, turning a defensive block into a lethal counter. Some kote even housed makibishi, caltrops disguised as cord knots. In retreat, a warrior could scatter these spiked traps with a flick of the wrist, slowing pursuers without breaking stride. The ingenuity didn't stop there. Elaborate sewed shoulder guards occasionally featured hollow panels, their interiors lined with washi paper soaked in poison. A single scratch from these edges could turn a minor wound fatal, a grim reminder that samurai warfare wasn't always about fair play but survival. Even the do chestplate held mysteries. Beneath ornate family crests, some armors concealed yoroi bitsu, slim compartments for inro medicine cases or folded kami prayers. The Take clan famously embedded tiny scrolls of Sun Tzu's art of war within their armor's layers, wisdom pressed against the heart. Others went darker. After the introduction of firearms, some do included lead-lined pockets to slow musket balls, a crude but effective gambit against the changing face of war. The most haunting secrets, those meant not for killing but remembrance. Some suits contained locks of a child's hair, miniature portraits of loved ones, or Buddhist death poems tucked behind the waydate side plates. These weren't just mementos, they were promises. To die with armor full of memories was to ensure you wouldn't be forgotten. From poison to prayers, these hidden layers reveal a truth Hollywood rarely captures. Samurai armor wasn't just about facing death head-on. Sometimes it was about cheating it one whispered secret at a time. The thunder of gunfire on the battlefield didn't just change combat, it shattered a 1,000-year-old art form. When Portuguese traders brought matchlock muskets to Japan in 1543, they unwittingly signed the death warrant for traditional samurai armor. Those first Tengashima muskets, crude as they were, could punch through even the finest iron plates with ease. Suddenly, the painstakingly folded steel of a do chestplate was as fragile as rice paper against a bullet's kiss. Armorers scrambled to adapt, hammering thicker plates and adding tameshii-proof marks to showcase bullet resistance. But these stopgaps couldn't hide the truth. Armor was no longer the invincible shield it once was. The Sengoku period's battlefields became brutal laboratories, where the old ways of war bled out in the mud alongside the warriors who clung to them. Yet the true coup de grace for functional armor didn't come from foreign guns, it came from peace. When Tokugawa Ieyasu unified Japan in 1600, ushering in the Edo period's 250 years of stability, the demand for battlefield-ready yoroi evaporated. Samurai became bureaucrats in silk robes, their swords reduced to ceremonial accessories. Armor didn't disappear, it transformed. Workshops that once hammered out battle-worthy steel now crafted domaru suits so delicate their lacquer cracked if worn too vigorously. These weren't weapons, they were costumes tailored for pageants and shogunal processions where the only battle was impressing rival clans with opulence. The Gusokushi armorers, once revered as war artisans, now competed over whose gold leaf applique shimmered brightest in candlelight. The Edo period's armor became a walking contradiction. On the surface, it looked grander than ever, kabuto helmets bristling with gilded wooden horns, sewed shoulder guards carved into elaborate wave motifs. But beneath the spectacle, the craftsmanship grew hollow. Lacing patterns became impossibly intricate, not for flexibility but to showcase wealth. A single suit might use silk cords dyed with rare sappanwood red, costing more than a peasant's yearly rice yield. Some kabuto were so top-heavy with ornamentation they couldn't be worn without support stands. The tatami gusoku, foldable armor made for traveling officials, summed up the era's priorities, collapsible into a lacquered suitcase, perfect for a warlord who'd never see combat but needed to look the part during tea ceremonies. Even spiritual symbolism faded. Where Sengoku-era armor hid sutras and mirrors for protection, Edo suits displayed them openly, not as talismans but as jewelry. A menpo mask's once terrifying snarl softened into a theatrical grimace, its copper fangs too thin to intimidate. the shift was starkest in children's armor. Heirloom suits from the Warring States showed honest wear dents from arrows, frayed cords from hasty repairs. Edo-era replicas were spotless, their unscarred surfaces whispering of a generation that would never know battle. But perhaps the most telling change was in the armor's final destination. No longer offered to shrines as sacred relics, Edo-period suits gathered dust in clan storehouses or became dowries for political marriages. Some were even dismantled for parts, a kabuto's crest repurposed as a decorative screen, a dew transformed into a bizarre flower vase. The warrior's second skin had become a curiosity, its original purpose as forgotten as the sound of battlefield war cries. Yet in this twilight, something unexpected emerged. Freed from the demands of war, armor became pure art. The Heian school, famous for forging battle-ready helmets, now crafted kabuto so thin and precise they could float on water, a technical marvel with no military value. Lacquer masters like Shunsho turned sewed into canvases, painting autumn leaves so vivid they seemed to tremble in an unfelt wind. This wasn't decline, it was metamorphosis. The soul of samurai armor didn't die, it simply traded steel for silk, warfare for wonder, and in that transformation it captured a new truth, that beauty too can be a kind of battle cry. Preserving a 500-year-old samurai suit isn't just about dusting off metal, it's a race against time, chemistry, and the ghosts of past battles. Today's conservators face a paradox. These armors were built to withstand swords and arrows, but their greatest enemies now are sunlight, humidity, and the very air we breathe. Take the lacquer, for instance, that glossy black sheen that once deflected blood and rain. It's actually a fragile skin of tree sap mixed with charcoal, prone to cracking like dried mud if the humidity dips too low. Modern labs use climate-controlled cases that mimic the exact conditions of a Japanese spring day: 60% humidity, 18 degrees Celsius, because even a week in the wrong environment can make centuries-old lacquer peel like sunburnt skin. And then there's the silk lacing. Those vibrant cords that held entire suits together weren't just decorative, they were the armor's tendons. But silk degrades faster than iron, leaving conservators with a heart-stopping choice: replace the frayed threads and lose historical authenticity, or let them crumble and risk the entire suit collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. The painstaking art of restoration often feels like performing surgery on a ghost. At the Tokyo National Museum, specialists use tools more delicate than a watchmaker's ultra-fine needles to rethread loosened odoshi, miniature vacuums to suck dust from between scales without disturbing the original patina. Some teams even employ 3D scanning to map every dent and scratch before cleaning, creating digital fingerprints of damage that tell stories no history book records. That jagged gash near a do's left side, the scan might reveal it was made by a naginata blade at a 30-degree upward angle, evidence of a desperate strike from a fallen foe. But not all damage comes from battle. A famous Yaju clan armor showed mysterious green stains under UV light, later traced to 19th-century collectors who'd freshened the metal with vinegar, unknowingly accelerating corrosion. Perhaps the most controversial challenge is rust. Traditionalists argue every spot tells a story and should be left untouched, but purists counter that unchecked corrosion is like leaving a wound unstitched, it'll eat through history itself. The compromise, Nankin Boshi, a centuries-old technique where rice paste draws out rust without abrasive scrubbing. At Kyoto's Imperial Armory, restorers mix this paste with washi paper fibers to create a poultice that gently pulls impurities from iron over weeks, like drawing poison from a snakebite. The result isn't the sterile shine of modern metal, but the deep, mottled hue the armor had when its owner last clasped it shut. Private collectors add another layer of complexity. When a long-lost Hosokawa suit surfaced in a French chateau attic, its kabuto had been repaired with 18th-century European rivets that distorted the helmet's shape. Undoing this well-meaning butchery took 2 years of microscopic work, comparing every plate to period illustrations. Yet even mistakes become part of the armor's journey. The rivets were preserved in a display case beside the restored helmet, a reminder that preservation isn't about erasing history but untangling its threads. New technologies are rewriting what's possible. Laser cleaning can now vaporize grime molecule by molecule without touching original lacquer. Hyperspectral imaging reveals faded crests invisible to the naked eye, like the Sanada clan's 6-coin symbol found beneath layers of soot on a misattributed dew. And in Osaka, scientists are developing nanocellulose coatings derived from rice straw that could stabilize fragile silk cords for another century without altering their texture. But the real frontier might be biological. A recent breakthrough involved koji mold, the same fungus used to brew sake, being trained to eat harmful bacteria on armor surfaces while leaving historical materials untouched. Nature, it seems, is becoming the ultimate conservator. Every restored suit is a conversation across centuries. When a conservator's hand steadies a wobbling sewed plate, they're not just fixing metal, they're catching something a warrior once entrusted to the future. The faint smell of old iron and lacquer that lingers on their gloves, that's the scent of time itself, held together by silk and stubborn hope. Hollywood and video game studios love the visual drama of samurai armor, glossy lacquer, snarling masks, billowing silk, but how much of what we see on screen mirrors history? Take The Last Samurai's climactic battle. Tom Cruise's character dons a sleek black gyusoku, its plates gleaming under the sun. While undeniably striking, real Boshin War-era armor was often more utilitarian, with muted colors and practical reinforcements for bullet resistance. The film's designers prioritized aesthetics over accuracy, exaggerating the sewed shoulder guards to make the silhouette more imposing. Yet they got one thing hauntingly right: the way the armor sounds. Every footstep clinks with the weight of laced plates, a detail pulled straight from historical accounts describing the eerie music of an advancing samurai line. Anime often takes even greater liberties but sometimes uncovers deeper truths. Samurai Champloo's rebellious Jin wears a simplified do maru that reflects his lone wolf status. No gaudy crests, just functional black plates. It's historically plausible for a Ronin, but the show's hip-hop aesthetic bends time itself. Contrast that with Vinland Saga's painstakingly researched Yoroi, where every kabuto crest and odoshi color matches specific Heian period clans. The series even nails the awkward mobility. Characters struggle to turn their heads in multi-plated shikoro, a realism most live action films skip for the sake of fluid combat. Then there's Ghost of Tsushima, the video game that became a cultural touchstone. Its armor customization mixes accuracy with fantasy. Players can unlock historically faithful Sohei monk garb or don mythic sets glowing with supernatural energy. The Gosoku armor, with its bulky iron plates, mirrors Sengoku period designs, but the Sakai clan helmet's golden crest is pure Hollywood grandeur. Where the game shines is in its subtle details. Rain beads on lacquer dew, mud clings to Heidate thigh guards, and arrow impacts leave realistic dents rather than cartoonish scratches. It's a love letter to samurai lore, even when it strays from fact. But pop culture's biggest myth, the idea that samurai armor was quiet. Films depict stealthy warriors sneaking through castles, but authentic Yoroi was anything but silent. A fully suited samurai clattered like a walking kitchen, chains jingling, plates rasping, kusazori skirt guards swishing with every step. That's why ambushes in historical battles relied on ashigaru foot soldiers in lighter gear, not armored elites. When Game of Thrones borrowed samurai aesthetics for the Unsullied, they kept the sleekness but lost the symphony of noise that defined real battlefield movement. The trend now leans toward hybrid designs. Nioh 2 and Elden Ring fuse historical elements with grotesque fantasy. Menpo masks morphing into demonic visages, sewed guards sprouting bloody thorns. Yet these exaggerations often circle back to authentic fears. A Dark Souls boss clad in fractured Omicron Yoroi isn't accurate, but its shattered plates evoke the Sengoku period's brutality better than any textbook. Even Star Wars Mandalorian armor owes a debt to samurai aesthetics, with its layered plates and crest-like T-visors proof that these designs still resonate across galaxies and centuries. What's fascinating is how pop culture's inaccuracies sometimes reveal deeper emotional truths. A kabuto with flaring horns might not match a museum piece, but it captures the terror foes felt seeing a warlord charge. A menpo frozen in a perpetual scream isn't textbook, but it embodies the psychological warfare samurai wielded. These creative choices remind us that armor was never just metal. It was theater, myth, and menace woven into steel. And when a game or film gets that feeling right, even the purists might forgive a few historical shortcuts. For 700 years, the name Myochin echoed through Japan's forge halls like the ring of a master's hammer, a dynasty of armorers who turned blacksmithing into high art. What began as a humble workshop in the 12th century became the gold standard for samurai armor, with techniques so refined they bordered on alchemy. The Myochin weren't just craftsmen, they were innovators. Their secret, a revolutionary method of folding and laminating steel, creating plates that were feather-light yet could withstand a direct arrow strike. One surviving Myochin do from the 16th century weighs less than 9 pounds but shows barely a dent from musket tests, a testament to their obsession with balancing protection and mobility. Their helmets, known as sujai bokai, featured precise ribbing that didn't just look striking. The ridges acted like miniature armor for the armor, redirecting blade impacts along the grooves. It wasn't just engineering, it was poetry in iron. Yet the Myochin's brilliance wasn't confined to the battlefield. During the Edo period, when war gave way to pageantry, they adapted with breathtaking creativity. Their kabuto helmets morphed into sculptural marvels, some so delicately forged you could see light through the steel, others shaped like swirling waves or mythical beasts with articulated tongues that trembled as the wearer moved. A single Myochin kabuto might take 2 years to complete, its plates hammered thinner than a coin, yet capable of stopping a sword strike. Their workshops became academies, passing down techniques through riddles and rituals. Apprentices spent years just learning to mix the perfect lacquer, a recipe that included crushed oyster shells for resilience and persimmon tannin to repel water. To wear a Myochin suit wasn't just to don armor, it was to cloak yourself in generations of obsessive genius, but the Myochin weren't alone in shaping armor's evolution. In Kyoto, the Seitome school took a different approach, specializing in Naragawa armor crafted from hardened leather. Where Myochin celebrated steel, Seitome masters manipulated rawhide like cloth, boiling and lacquering it into plates that rivaled metal in strength. Their signature technique, kawatsutsumi, involved wrapping leather cords around critical joints to create flexible yet impenetrable seams. A surviving Seitome Hara 8 from the Sengoku period still bears the scar of a thwarted spear thrust. The leather split but didn't pierce, saving its wearer's life. The school's most haunting legacy, Shikigami armor, dyed stark white and inscribed with ink spells believed to confuse enemy archers. Warriors swore these suits shimmered like ghosts in midwinter fog, making their wearers uncannily hard to target. Meanwhile, in Edo, the Unkai school merged art and function with theatrical flair. Their armors were tapestries of symbolism, every motif a coded message. A do etched with crashing waves didn't just signify naval prowess, it whispered of the wearer's connection to Ryujin, the dragon god of the sea. Unkai's crowning achievement was Hikihaku Odoshi, lacing woven with threads of pure gold or silver, so luminous it seemed to glow in battle. One warlord's armor featured Odoshi dyed with AI indigo, so rare it required trading with Dutch merchants, the equivalent of lining a modern bulletproof vest with designer silk. These schools didn't just compete, they conversed across centuries. When Myachin smiths developed Tetsu Sabai rust proofing, Sayatome responded with Shibukawa, leather treated with fermented persimmon to resist mold. Their rivalry birthed hybrids like the Tetsu Neragawa Do, steel plates backed with leather for silent movement preferred by ninja hunting samurai. Yet beyond technique, these traditions shared a sacred philosophy. That armor wasn't forged but born. Smiths spoke of listening to the metal's grain, of quenching blades in spring water only under certain moon phases. A Myachin scroll from 1724 puts it plainly. The steel chooses its warrior as much as the warrior chooses the steel. Today, fragments of these schools survive. In Tokyo's Sword Museum, a Myachin kabuto rests beside a Sayatome menpo, their silent dialogue echoing through glass cases. Modern artisans still strain to replicate their methods like the Myachin Manihiro, a 21st-century smith who spent a decade relearning how to forge Sujai Bokai ribs without modern tools. His breakthroughs came from studying insect wings of all things, their natural ridges inspiring him to mimic ancient patterns. It's a fitting homage. Because the true legacy of these schools isn't just in the armor they left behind, it's in the unbroken thread of curiosity, the relentless hunger to fuse beauty and survival into something transcendent. When you see sunlight dance across a 500-year-old Myachin helmet, you're not just seeing steel, you're seeing a mind at work across time. Stepping into a full suit of samurai armor wasn't something you could rush. It was a ritual as deliberate as a tea ceremony, each step imbued with purpose. Picture a warrior standing barefoot on tatami mats at dawn, his attendants moving around him like priests preparing for a sacrament. The process began with the shita-gi, a padded underrobe that cushioned the body against the armor's hard edges. This wasn't just cloth, it was a second skin, often lined with silk embroidered with protective sutras. Next came the kaihan, cloth gaiters wrapped tightly around the calves to prevent chafing from the sunniate shin guards. Every fold had to lie just so too loose and the fabric would bunch, too tight and blood flow would be cut off mid-battle. The chest plate, came next, a moment of profound significance. An attendant would lift it with both hands as if presenting a sacred object before lowering it onto the warrior's shoulders. The weight wasn't just physical, it was the weight of lineage of ancestors who'd worn similar armor into countless battles. The odoshi cords, laced in patterns specific to the clan, had to be tightened with precision, each pull distributing the load evenly across the torso. Too much tension on one side could throw off balance in combat, a fatal flaw when facing a skilled opponent. Warriors trained for years just to navigate this process flawlessly, developing an intimate knowledge of every knot and loop. Some even practiced blindfolded, their fingers memorizing the armor's geography like musicians learning an instrument. Then came the coat arm guards, slipped on like sleeves but with hidden complexities. The left coat was always more heavily armored, its layers of chainmail and iron plates tailored to deflect arrows while drawing a bow. Warriors would flex their wrists repeatedly during fitting, testing the guard's resistance too stiff, and their sword strokes would lack fluidity, too loose, and a well-placed strike could sever tendons. The Heidate thigh guards followed, tied around the waist with cords adjusted to allow full range of motion. Veterans knew to leave a finger's width of slack, just enough to kneel suddenly or spring forward without restriction. The kabuto helmet was the crowning moment. Before placing it on the warrior's head, attendants would often tuck a gamogi prayer strip inside, nestled against the forehead plate for divine protection. The helmet's shikoro neck guard had to be aligned perfectly. Too far forward, and it would block peripheral vision. Too far back, and it left the throat exposed. A seasoned warrior could judge the fit by the sound of the plates shifting as he turned his head. A quiet rustle meant proper mobility, while silence signaled dangerous rigidity. Finally, the menpo mask was secured, its snarling visage transforming the wearer into something otherworldly. But even here, practicality ruled. The mask's interior was often lined with absorbent fabric to soak up sweat, while the flared nostrils allowed for steady breathing during exertion. Some masks featured a small hook under the chin, not for intimidation but to anchor the yodel cake throat guard, ensuring it wouldn't flap loose mid-combat. Moving in full armor was an art unto itself. New recruits often stumbled under the weight, their strides clumsy as they adjusted to the kusazuri skirt guards swaying around their hips. But veterans moved with eerie grace, their bodies trained to anticipate the armor's rhythms. The secret lay in the hips. Samurai learned to pivot from the waist rather than the legs, allowing the layered plates to flow with their movements like water. A properly worn suit didn't hinder, it enhanced, its weight lending power to sword strikes and its structure optimizing posture for archery. The true test came in battle simulations where warriors practiced falling and rising in armor, a skill as vital as swordsmanship. A samurai who toppled awkwardly risked suffocating under his own gear, the kabuto acting like an anchor. Masters taught their students to roll into a fall, tucking the sewed shoulder guards inward to absorb impact, then using the do's curvature to rock back onto their knees. It took years to move effortlessly, to make the armor feel less like a shell and more like an extension of the body. By then, the rituals of dressing and fighting weren't just routine, they were reflex as natural as breathing. And when the battle was done, the process reversed, each piece removed with the same reverence as it was donned. The armor wasn't just stripped away, it was honored, its scratches and dents carefully noted like entries in a diary of war. A warrior might run his fingers along a fresh gouge in the dew, tracing the path of an enemy's blade that came too close, while his attendants inspected the odoshi for fraying that hinted at weaknesses. This, too, was part of the art, not just wearing the armor, but listening to what it told you. Every creak of the lacing, every shift of the plates, was a conversation between warrior and craft, a dialogue centuries in the making. In the world of the samurai, armor was far more than protection. It was a walking ledger of status, where every cord, crest, and curve whispered secrets about its wearer's rank. A high-ranking daimyo didn't just wear iron. He draped himself in a tapestry of wealth so glaring it could silence rivals before a single sword was drawn. Take the infamous odoshi lacing of the Hosokawa clan, dyed with murasaki, a purple so rare it came from seashells harvested by pearl divers. This wasn't just color, it was a flex. At a time when purple dye cost more than its weight in silver, a suit bound in such cords screamed, "I command the tides themselves." Even the shogun's court took notice. Chronicles describe envoys stumbling mid-speech when sunlight hit a warlord's violet-clad shoulders. Materials became mythologies. The Mori clan's kabuto helmets embedded with radon, mother-of-pearl inlay, didn't just glitter. They told a story of trade networks stretching to Okinawa and beyond. A single plate might feature a ballon shell painstakingly cut into cherry blossoms, each petal catching light like fractured mirrors, but the ultimate power move. Gold leaf, while lesser warriors lacquered their armor in humble blacks or reds, elites like Oda Nobunaga gilded their dew with gold foil so thin it trembled in the breeze. On the battlefield, this wasn't just reckless opulence, it was psychological warfare. Imagine charging toward a line of warriors who literally shone like minor deities, their armor throwing back the sun like human signal fires. Design complexity became another currency. While foot soldiers made do with simple Okawa-do chestplates, functional tubes of riveted metal, the elite flaunted Nuonobu-do, their surfaces sculpted to mimic the human torso's musculature. This wasn't vanity, it was virtuosity. Only the wealthiest lords could afford armorers who'd spend months hammering a single plate into anatomical perfection, every ripple and tendon a silent boast of craftsmanship. The Usugi clan took it further, commissioning Karuta Gain armor with tiny embossed scenes from the tale of Genji wearable literature that required a magnifying glass to fully appreciate. Even the weight of armor signaled status. Iron was heavy, but Neragawa boiled leather hardened with lacquer was feather-light and twice as expensive. A warlord who could outfit his entire retinue in Neragawa wasn't just rich, he had access to a secret economy of artisans and supply chains. The Taikta cavalry's infamous Akazoni, the Red Devils, rode into battle in leather hara 8 dyed crimson with Bini safflower pigment, a hue so vibrant it was said to stain the very wind as they passed. Their enemies didn't just see warriors, they saw a bankroll on horseback, but perhaps the most telling detail was what armor lacked. Only the highest-ranking samurai could afford shikaim zain. Scales so finely filed their edges didn't fray silk gloves. Lesser suits left rough edges hidden beneath lacing, but a daimyo's armor was smooth as river stones inside and out because why wouldn't it be? Even the unseen had to proclaim superiority. When Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the peasant who became regent, finally acquired his first true yoroi, he insisted on displaying it unassembled at banquets, forcing guests to admire each flawless component like jewels in a casket. The message was clear: in a society where land and titles could be lost overnight, armor was the one status symbol that couldn't be faked. A stolen suit would still bear its original clan's mon, and a counterfeit's shoddy craftsmanship would be exposed in battle's first clash. So warriors invested in steel like modern tycoons hoard art, not just for beauty, but as immortal ledgers of their rise. When a daimyo died, his armor often outlived him, passed down or enshrined as a relic. Because in the end, a samurai's true wealth wasn't measured in rice or gold. It was counted in the gleam of lacquer, the whisper of silk cords, and the unspoken awe of those who saw it and knew, here stands a man who bends the world to his will. The clang of steel rings out in a modern dojo, but the warriors wearing it aren't headed to battle, they're honoring a legacy. Across the world, martial artists are strapping on painstakingly crafted replicas of samurai armor, not for war but for keiko, the disciplined practice of traditional swordsmanship. In kenjutsu dojos from Tokyo to Texas, these suits aren't costumes, they're training tools that bridge centuries. A practitioner adjusting the coat on his forearm isn't just prepping for sparring, he's replicating the exact motions of a 16th century swordsman, feeling the same constraints and advantages his ancestors did. The weight of the do chestplate changes posture, grounding strikes in the hips. The limited peripheral vision from the kabuto helmet forces sharper awareness, turning every drill into a lesson in battlefield focus. This is history you can feel, but modern armor isn't just about preservation, it's adaptation. Today's replicas often swap iron for lightweight alloys and silk lacing for synthetic fibers that withstand sweat and repeated use. The menpo masks, once designed to terrify, now feature removable liners for hygiene, while still preserving the iconic snarls that make sparring partners hesitate instinctively. Some dojos even use 3D printed Sunny shin guards, their layered plates engineered for impact absorption without sacrificing historical accuracy. The goal isn't to mimic the past blindly, but to translate its wisdom. When a kendo master dons armor for teishui sparring, the sewed shoulder guards aren't just deflecting wooden bokken strikes, they're teaching how to angle the body to minimize exposure, a lesson straight from Heiho Kadensho, the classic samurai combat manual. The rituals surrounding armor have evolved too. In Kyoto's Yaju Shinkadryu school, students learn to dress each other in yoroi before advanced kata, a bonding exercise that mirrors the trust between battlefield retainers. The process, slower than historical methods, emphasizes mindfulness. Every tightened cord is a meditation on interdependence. Meanwhile, in Brazil's burgeoning kenjutsu scene, armor has become a living classroom. Instructors use replica Heidate thigh guards to demonstrate how feudal archers twisted their hips to clear the plates while drawing bows, marrying physical practice with archaeology. Perhaps the most striking revival is in competitive battejutsu, where cutting tests are now performed in full armor. Watching a practitioner in Gusoku sever a bamboo mat with one stroke isn't just spectacle, it's a test of authenticity. The armor's constraints expose sloppy technique. A poorly angled cut will catch on the coat or throw the wearer off balance. Those who excel speak of something uncanny, the armor seeming to guide their movements, as if the echoes of past masters linger in the lacquer and steel. Yet this renaissance faces challenges. Handcrafted reproductions can cost thousands, putting them out of reach for many dojos. Some purists argue that modern modifications dilute tradition, while others counter that innovation is the samurai spirit. After all, their armor evolved constantly to meet new threats. The debate itself feels refreshingly true to history. When a Minnesota Kenjutsu group crowdsources funds to commission a historically accurate Maichin-style kabuto, or when a Tokyo workshop experiments with bamboo fiber odoshi for sustainability, they're participating in the same dialogue that once unfolded in Edo period smithies. What emerges is a beautiful paradox. Armor that was once a tool of war now forging peace between past and present, between cultures, even between practitioner and opponent. When two Kenjutsu students bow in clad in gleaming yoroi, their blades touching in ritual salute, they're not reenacting violence. They're keeping a conversation alive, one written in steel, laced in silk, and louder than any battle cry. The forge glowed red in the pre-dawn darkness, but the true fire came from the smith's whispered chants, words older than the steel he hammered. To craft samurai armor wasn't merely a trade, it was a sacrament, each strike of the hammer a prayer to the kami of iron and flame. Before even lighting the charcoal, armorers underwent misogi, purifying themselves in icy waterfalls while reciting sutras to cleanse body and spirit. They knew the metal would remember every impurity in the smith's heart could weaken the armor's soul. The Maichin smiths, Japan's most revered armorers, kept scrolls detailing rituals modern science would later echo, quenching blades in water mixed with ash from temple incense, believing the sacred smoke would harden the steel against evil. Some added powdered oyster shells to the lacquer, not just for durability, but because the shellfish's unyielding grip on rocks symbolized unbreakable protection. The smelting of Tamahagane steel was a dance with the divine. Armorers buried their Tatara furnaces in sacred earth, aligning them with the four directions to harness cosmic balance. As the iron sand melted, priests waved Gohei paper wands overhead, invoking Kanayego, the Shinto god of blacksmiths, to guide the metal's spirit. The smiths timed their work to lunar cycles, forging helmet bowls during the waxing moon for growth, tempering arrow-deflecting plates under a full moon for completeness. Even the bellows weren't mere tools, their rhythm mimicked Buddhist mantra chants, the breaths of the furnace syncing with the smith's own. A surviving 16th century manual warns, steel forged in anger will shatter in grief. When lacing the armor's silk cords, artisans wove in more than thread. The Odoshi-ji ritual saw them dip each strand in tea steeped with Yamabushi mountain herbs, chanting spells for flexibility and strength. Certain patterns like the Kiku tortoise shell weave weren't just structural, they mirrored sacred Shinto temple lattices, turning the armor into a portable shrine. Some smiths tucked slivers of Gohonzon prayer tablets between plates, or etched minuscule daruma faces onto rivet heads, so tiny they were only visible under candlelight. These weren't decorations, they were wards meant to awaken the armor's spirit in battle. The final act was the yoku-aya, the life-giving ceremony. A Shinto priest would anoint the finished suit with sake, pressing our feudal talisman to the dew while invoking Hachiman, the god of war. The smith then performed kagami bairaki, ceremonially opening the armor by wearing it just once, not to test fit, but to transfer his own tamashii spirit into the steel. Warriors who received these blessed suits spoke of uncanny events. Arrows veering at the last moment, swords slipping off rounded plates as if guided by invisible hands. The armor didn't just protect, it remembered. This mystical craftsmanship wasn't superstition, it was precision disguised as poetry. modern metallurgists analyzing Maichin helmets found their rib designs distribute force identically to modern bicycle helmets, while the layered lacquer's molecular structure resembles bulletproof Kevlar. The prayers, it seems, were blueprints in disguise. When a smith chanted over molten metal, he wasn't just asking for divine aid, he was programming the armor's intent, stitch by sacred stitch. In a quiet Tokyo auction house, the bidding for a single kabuto helmet climbs past $2 million, not because of its gold leaf or intricate metalwork, but because of a nearly invisible scratch near the brim. To the untrained eye, it's a flaw. To collectors, it's a fingerprint. This dent matches historical accounts of the helmet worn by Date Masamune at the Battle of Sekigahara. The world of samurai armor collecting isn't just about art or history, it's a high-stakes hunt where every scratch tells a story, and authenticity is the only currency that matters. But where there's obsession, there's also shadow. Behind the velvet ropes of museums and the climate-controlled vaults of private collectors lurks a black market fueled by theft, forgery, and the desperate hunger to own a piece of the past. Some of the most brazen heists read like spy novels. In 2019, thieves broke into a small-town Japanese museum and made off with a Sengoku period yoroi valued at over 12 million yen. The twist, they left behind the display cases flashier swords, targeting only the armor, a telltale sign of a buyer who'd commissioned the theft. Insider knowledge fuels these crimes. A stolen suit often resurfaces years later with forged provenance papers, its origins laundered through auctions in Europe or the Middle East. The FBI's art crime unit once tracked a missing take-to-clan helmet to a Dubai penthouse. Its Medate crest hastily replated to disguise its identity. Forgeries have grown alarmingly sophisticated. Modern workshops in China and Vietnam now produce antique armor using centuries-old techniques, hand-forging iron, fermenting period-accurate lacquer, even artificially aging silk cords with tea stains and controlled mold growth. The most convincing fakes include authentic damage, carefully placed sword nicks or bullet tests that mimic Tameshii marks. One notorious counterfeiter was caught after X-rays revealed his Maichin-style kabuto had layered steel suspiciously similar to modern automotive alloy. Collectors now rely on forensic tools like spectrographic analysis to detect anachronistic metals or UV light to spot synthetic dyes masquerading as ancient AI indigo. The legal trade has its own gray areas. Many daimyo armors were disassembled during the Meiji era, their parts scattered across continents. Today, dealers painstakingly reunite chest plates with their original sewed shoulder guards by matching rust patterns and lacquer textures, a practice called yoroi kintsugi. But some take shortcuts, cobbling together mismatched pieces into complete suits that fetch inflated prices. A well-known London auction house once sold a prime Usugi armor, later proven to be a composite of 3 different clans' relics, its Mon crest subtly altered to suggest unity. The trade's dark underbelly isn't just about money, it's about cultural erasure. Many stolen armors vanish into private collections, their historical context severed forever. A Hojo clan Menpo mask stolen in 1997 reappeared decades later with its original Shikoro neck guard missing, rendering its battlefield lineage untraceable. Activists now push for an international registry of samurai armor, etching QR codes into kabuto linings to store provenance data, but greed still outpaces protection. For every armor recovered, like the Sanada Yukimura Gusoku found in a Texas storage unit, dozens remain lost. The hunt continues not just by police, but by historians piecing together clues from auction catalogs and faded photographs. Because every missing suit isn't just stolen metal, it's a voice from the past, silenced. Centuries may have passed, but the soul of samurai armor still breathes. Not just in museums behind glass, but in the way its legacy reshapes how we see strength, beauty, and resilience. These suits were never mere tools of war. They were canvases where metal met mythology, where a warrior's fears and hopes were hammered into something tangible. Every dragon crest, every silk-laced cord, every dent from a battle long forgotten whispers the same truth. Armor was the samurai's second skin, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. What survives today isn't just steel and lacquer. It's the echo of a philosophy that fused art with survival, turning brutality into something almost sacred. Walk through the halls of the Tokyo National Museum or the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you'll see crowds hushed before these masterpieces, not just for their craftsmanship, but for the stories they carry. That Myachin helmet with its intricate ribs isn't just a relic. It's a testament to how innovation thrived under the pressure of war, the faded indigo lacing on a Hosokawa chestplate. That's the ghost of a dynasty's pride, still vibrant enough to make your fingertips tingle with imagined history. And those menpo masks frozen in eternal snarls remind us that armor wasn't just about defense. It was theater, psychology, a way to stare down death and laugh. But the real magic happens when these pieces leave the display cases and slip back into our collective imagination. Video games like Ghost of Tsushima let us virtually strap on Yoroi, feeling its weight and hearing its whisper. Martial artists in dojos worldwide don replicas not to fight but to commune with the past. Even fashion designers borrow from the odoshi lacing patterns, transforming battle gear into runway art. The samurai's armor refuses to fade because it speaks to something universal, the human need to armor ourselves, not just in steel but in meaning. So here's where we pass the torch to you. Maybe you've stood breathless before a suit in Kyoto's Samurai Museum, or perhaps you've traced the lines of a kabuto in a history book. Share your stories in the comments, the legends that sent chills down your spine, the armor that made your heart race. Better yet, seek these masterpieces out. Stand close enough to see the brushstrokes in the lacquer, the frayed threads of a once vibrant cord. Let them remind you that history isn't just dates and dust, it's the glint of sunlight on iron, the quiet creak of leather, the unbroken thread between then and now. If these hidden layers of the past have sparked your curiosity, don't let the journey end here. Hit subscribe and join us as we unravel more historical mysteries, one rivet, one revelation at a time. The samurai's armor may have hung up its sword, but its stories, they're just waiting for the next chapter.